Okay, okay, go ahead, Dave. It's all yours.
All right, so my name is Dave Pasquale. I'm the owner of Pasquale Aviation, and with me here today is Jessica Nordlander. The two of us do a lot of work with cylinder inspections, and since February, Jess has been doing cylinder inspection analysis for Savvy Aviation, which I also work for Savvy and for Mike. Um, and so the two of us have been looking at a lot of things related to cylinder inspections as the result of that service. Um, so that's the basic introduction, unless you want to talk yourself. Don't be shy. So up here on the screen, I have the first folder I opened up on my hard drive of things that we've saved here and there is the this is an early stage uneven heat signature on an exhaust valve from a Lycoming engine. And Lycoming exhaust valves have been something that have been a bit challenging from an analyst standpoint. So what we see here in this valve, since it's got a sodium filled valve stem, you can see, can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Moving
Yes.
around? So you see my cursor moving around this circle. That's the center of what would be the bullseye on a normal heat signature. And then out here where I'm moving, that's also the normal part of the valve. And normally that outer ring here would go all the way around the valve. But in this case, in this valve, since this is an early uneven heat signature, the outer ring tapers off right here, and then it tapers off up here. And this right here is where the hot spot is on that valve. And we see that's how we see it when we see uneven heat signatures, is they'll develop these C-shaped, patterns on the edge of the valve. And that's because the sodium filled valve stem does a lot of the cooling. It does the majority of the cooling on a Lycoming valve. The next picture, if it comes up here, this is a late stage uneven heat signature on a Lycoming exhaust valve. And you can see, just like it does on the Continental, it can turn green on the edge. But notice also that unlike the Continental, we have on all the rest of the valve, it's still got a normal, what would be a normal heat signature. The uneven part of it generally doesn't progress all the way across the valve head like it does on a Lycoming or on a Continental. So you can see here, we end up with the hot spot having a green arc and then a red arc, coming across there. It's just got striations from the different temperature ranges that valve sees. Obviously, the intersection here is probably close to normal operating temperature, and this out here is beyond what the metal of the valve is capable of dealing with. Those are the basic things with Lycoming. Normal uneven heat signatures on Lycoming valves. We do see, and I'll navigate around to some of my pictures. Let me slide this over here.
Dave, while you're navigating, are either of those images repairable by valve lapping?
So the first one, yeah, the first one you could definitely lap. The second one would not be a good candidate for lapping. And I'm trying to look through, like we've been gathering as we're doing analysis, we're just snag photos here and there,
Right.
to show, just for these kind of events. Like this here's another Lycoming exhaust valve with an earlier stage uneven heat signature, and you can see again over here on the corner, 3 o'clock position again is the hot spot. Let me
And
see.
that one can be lapped.
Yeah, that one would be a good candidate for being lapped.
What about the
Yeah,
cause of that, Davis? What is the cause of that one being uneven?
well, we think that it's related to lack of rotation on the exhaust valve on a Lycoming. But we don't have the hard evidence of that like we do on the Continental. So I've had one in the shop, like one of the first Lycoming valves that I've seen with an uneven heat signature. Um, oh yeah, do we need to hit that? Yeah. One of the first Lycoming valves that we saw with an uneven heat signature that looked like this one here, the cap that's on the top of the valve stem actually had a groove worn into it from the rocker arm.
Oh boy.
But we don't often see that. I was just talking with a client today who, was wanting more explanation. Not that I'm recommending anyone do this, and we generally frown upon it, but the guy cold called me at the shop and was looking for some clarification on a valve that it didn't have as bad a heat signature as this. It probably looked more like the first valve that I showed you. Um, and was talking about lapping it and things. And that was one of the questions I asked was what the cap looked like because he had lapped it and he was 25 hours out since lapping the valve, and it still had essentially, it wasn't as severe as this, but it was more like that other one, still had an early mid-stage uneven heat signature to it 25 hours after lapping. He said that when they did lap it, they didn't see any difference in the rotator cap between the one they took off and the one they put on. They put a new one on when they lapped the valve.
Right.
Um, it's tricky though with Lycomings. They do expect the valves to rotate in operation, um, but they don't do it in a mechanical sense like the Continental does. The Continental has a rotator that mechanically, physically rotates the
Right.
valve every time it opens and closes. The way the Lycoming is, they're relying on the geometry between the rocker arm and the valve stem to rotate the valve. So it's tough because that may be, it's possible that Lycomings tend to build deposits in the exhaust valve guide and they'll get sticky. Well, it may be that when they get you know, a little bit of buildup, but not so much that they're sticking, it may be possible that it's not moving free enough to rotate. Um, but we don't have solid evidence of one way or another what's causing one to burn and one not to burn. Um, like this one here, I don't know. We don't have, you know, evidence of what the rest of the valve look like, to be able to say that, oh, well, it's definitely caused by this, like it is on the
Right.
Continental.
Hey,
Is there
Dave.
is
Dave,
Yeah,
I have a question.
yeah,
I
go
think
ahead.
this might be a good time to introduce the concept of sidestepping and what that means in this context.
Okay, so sidestepping, um, okay, so we're looking at the side of this valve here, right? If you were to put the scope in this cylinder and watch this valve close, it would hit the seat, and when it would hit the seat, it would move over a little bit. Um, what we believe, like that used to be thought of as the sole cause for burning valves. And I from what we've found now is the lack of rotation is the primary reason for valves to fail, and that the sidestepping, which is a function of play in the valve guide, that sidestepping is kind of a component of the failure. So as long as the valve rotates, the sidestepping doesn't cause any adverse issue. But if the valve stops rotating, then it concentrates the wear right where the valve is hitting all the time. Um, that's more of a continental issue than a Lycoming issue. It's not that Lycoming valves don't sidestep, but they generally aren't as sloppy as the continental ones. Like continental valves, like we've seen some that were really bad. We saw, I don't think you captured it. Was it yesterday or this morning? You saw one that I mean, it looked like the edge of the valve guide was almost like a knife edge. It was worn so bad. You know, and of course the valve was a mess. But that one there, I think we were telling them not to continue that in service, right?
Yeah.
Because it was just so well beyond what we had ever seen in terms of guide wear. This picture here, I think this may be the valve that was
This is the valve that
we
was the
were
last
just showing. The
picture.
last
Mhm.
picture, they had a good shot of that valve from the edge, and you can see in here, you know, you can see the valve's not making good contact with the seat. And you can actually see the heat signature on the other side of the valve, which is pretty unusual. You know, where you can see it up in here. That's why we kept that image. We try to get some. We should have grabbed that one with the valve guide too. This looks like a continental valve. This is a mid-stage uneven heat signature. You can see, you know, coming around here. That's the center section of the heat signature is going around there, and then the outer ring, which is out here, is breaking off. You know, it actually looks like there's more than one. Like out here's the farthest out ring is breaking off here, and then the next one in is going off there, and kind of the same thing up here, and then around there, and then this is the hot spot forming that semicircle coming in toward the center of the valve. That's a mid late stage. You know, it's like pushing into the later stage, but not quite there yet.
Would you lap that one?
Yeah, that last one I would lap. This is a normal valve. I'm not sure why we kept this one, because I can't see the header. I'm betting this
I
might,
think we kept that one because we were going to show that when you do compression testing, people were asking what those marks were.
which these marks
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, so we were going to show when you do a compression test, it's those are what those marks are from.
I don't think so.
That's what we
Really? I was thinking this one was because of let me see if I can bring up the name of it. Does it say what the name is? It just says, oh, that's a 100 hours post overhaul. No rotator replacement. So I mean it looks like a normal heat signature to me. Let me get back to it here. So that's it. That's a normal heat signature. And what Jess was talking to are these little dimples here, but I don't think those dimples are related to compression testing.
We were talking about something about those dimples.
Yeah, I don't
what it
remember.
was.
This here is another, you know, early stage uneven heat signature. Looks like a continental valve to me. So you see how it's got this little thing in here. And I think this one we were looking at it it was related to rotation or something. Yeah, no, that was 200. Oh, maybe that's the same valve. That's what that was. That was the same valve as that first picture was 100 hours post overhaul with no rotator replacement. This is 200 hours post overhaul with no rotator replacement. So that's what that was. That was the overhaul shop that worked on the cylinder. So they overhauled the cylinder and then didn't replace the valve rotator. So this image here was 100 hours after they overhauled the cylinder, and you can see it's got a normal heat signature, but the valve wasn't rotating, and we couldn't really pick that up because there's no real, other than these two little dimples, there's no real identifying marks. And then this is 200 hours after the cylinder was overhauled, and we can see that the valve is already developing an uneven heat signature. And I think that was the issue. The client, the owner of the airplane, was concerned about this because, you know, they had only got 200, you know, only had 200 hours on the cylinder, and now they're already developing an uneven heat signature on the exhaust valve. I don't know.
Why wouldn't you just replace the rotators like immediately?
Well, see, a lot of shops, they look at the rotator, they hold it in their hand, and they're like, oh, it looks fine. It, you know, you can spin it freely and everything seems fine, but the internals of it are what the issue is. And you
Right.
can't see that unless you cut it apart. You know, in our shop, and whenever we send out cylinders, we have standing orders with the engine shop we use to replace the rotator, no matter what they're doing, if they're doing an IRAN or if they're doing an overhaul.
Yeah, because he lost compression
Yeah,
real quick between that.
yeah, and he had a, Jess was saying that he lost compression between these two.
Yeah.
So you want me to just keep going through pictures?
I guess, yeah. I mean, I guess for our group, I'm wondering what would be most worthwhile. Like, what are they looking for that would be a,
I
you know,
mean, for exhaust valves, you know, it's the stuff we were talking about. You're looking for a uniform heat signature. So like, I don't know, sample images here. I probably have, let me bring up some of these. So like, this is a pretty normal valve. The only thing I don't like with this one, you know, what we're looking for is we want to see this ring here. We want to see a uniform ring, and we want to see the outer ring, you know, outer and inner rings being normal or being concentric. And this one here is a little weird because it's got this buildup here and this buildup there, and then the intersection is a little, you know, you see how it's like almost shaped like a D. Probably not the best normal valve picture. That one I
what
would probably say to check back in like 25 or 30 hours and see
what
how
is that red on the outer area? What is that red
the
material?
reddish coloration. So
Yeah.
that's dependent on, it's a byproduct of combustion, and it's dependent on the heat and the fuel
Yeah.
mixture. And that's normal. Valves can look anywhere from like this blackish gray color all the way to like a burnt rust color, like red color. And that's normal. Like that's not concerning at all. What we're mostly concerned with is the shape of the heat signature.
Well, and sometimes with Lycoming valves too, we always, if we're not like 100% sure if they look odds, because sometimes they will, we'll like say to check it in 25 hours, and we'll also ask what your compressions are. And then because sometimes it could just be an anomaly, so it might look different, but it could be normal. And that's because of the sodium filled valve stem.
Yeah, I'm sure I have some pictures with like, I'm trying to see if I have pictures here that have, you know, not normal heat signatures, but like not burned. Yeah, it's hard with Lycomings. Man, I don't know. Let me look in. Let's go back in this one. Take that. I mean, this is the basic set of images. So like, here's an exhaust valve head. If I can get it to come up here. I got to move the toolbar. Now it went horizontal. I mean, this is a pretty normal looking valve head. And wherever it went. Or sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to move the toolbar out of the way.
Okay.
You know, the picture that the bar that shows everybody. Here we go.
Like,
Does that move around for you when I do that? Or is
the
it
cursor moves, but
okay, but not the bar with everybody's picture?
no.
All right, so this is a pretty normal looking valve, and you can see this one's got the red coloration in the middle and is you know, dark gray on the outside. This is a continental valve, and that's normal. And normal Lycoming valves will look like that most of the time. You know, will look similar. They'll have that same bullseye pattern to them, and the same, you know, the same colorations will develop. And I can't find a quick example of the thing that Jess was talking about, where the best example might have been that one that we had in this group here. which I don't know where it went. Where was that? No, it wasn't edited. It was where sample images in here. The best one of that irregular stuff that I have right now that I can quickly access is this one. You know, we see stuff like this where it's got these kind of blotchiness to it. And that kind of thing we're recommending to check in 30 hours. And the 30-hour interval for that comes from what we see when we lap valves. So if we had like a mid-stage uneven heat signature and we lap the valve, uh, and it's successful by 25, 30 hours, it's normally back, you know, it's typically back to normal heat signature at that point. So like these kind of things where you have, you know, two patches of buildup 180 degrees apart, what I would be concerned with this one is that it was over temped. Though typically when we see over temps, we'll see hot spots, you know, 180 degrees apart, where this one here doesn't look like it's got an actual hot spot, you know, but the outer ring being, you know, for lack of a better word, broken, you know, is cause for, you know, watching it a little closer. And like Jess was saying, if this was a Lycoming valve, we would look at compression too. Um, you know, I know like, you know, Mike and Paul and those guys have said that compression is almost a throwaway tool. But what we have found is that it does have some value. It's another data point. And when we've seen Lycoming valves that were kind of like that mid-stage one, which let me see if I can navigate back to it. When they're was it this one? When they're kind of like this, what we've seen with valves that look like this one is they may not have below passing compression, but what they might have is they'll have like, you know, a 62 over 80 when all the cylinders on the engine all are blowing like 75 over 80 or 76 over 80, you know. So this one will have lower compression. You might hear a little bit more noise coming out of the exhaust, you know, during the compression chest. Um, but it's not, you know, anything that would outside of the image would cause concern. So a lot of times when we see valves like this, we're asking for compression numbers to see what, you know, what they compare to when they, you know, how they compare to the other cylinders on the engine that would have a normal heat signature. Um, I don't know what else you want to look at. You want to just look through pictures or because I mean there's a whole bunch of stuff to look at in these cylinder reports, and we see all kinds of things like this was the next one in the group. So I mean you can see this is a piston head. And I believe this was on a parallel valve Lycoming, probably like an 0540 that you'd find on like a Cherokee 6 or something like that. You can see over here the circular pattern on the piston head. That's from the piston hitting an open valve. And that happens when the valve sticks. So that would be the morning sickness condition. And Lycoming has a service bulletin on that, and I can't remember the number. I think it's like SB 380 or something like that. That covers how to check for, you know, it talks about how to check for play in the valves between the valve and the valve guide, where you basically put a dial indicator on the top of the stem and measure the wobble of the valve in the valve guide. And if it's below a certain amount, then they want you to push the valve into the cylinder and ream the guide. In this case here, the valve stuck open and then the piston came up and hit it. Usually when that happens, we see, you know, things like bent push rods, and if they're really severe, you can damage the lifter. You can damage the valve too. I'm not really sure. It's be an interesting question for Mike whether or not he would recommend pulling a cylinder like this. Whenever I've seen them and encountered them personally, we've always ended up pulling them and sending them out for IRAN, because we were concerned about damage to the valve itself.
I recall Paul talking about there's this that Lycoming service bulletin where they recommend, and I don't know what it is either off the top, but regular at certain interval to do the reaming of the guides.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll find that and post it on our site.
Yeah, that's the same service bulletin I was talking to or
Yep.
talking about.
Yep.
So this image here, so this is another, oh, if as soon as I can find the window. So this next image is another Lycoming, a common issue with Lycoming. And this is like really common in the four-cylinder carbureted engines. So this we're looking at the intake valve. And you can see as they get up in time, all carbureted engines tend to do this to some extent. But Lycoming carbureted engines do it even more. They build this carbon on the back of them. So far, I know a lot of people when they see it, when they send reports in, they'll have concern about that and they'll ask us questions about it. For the most part, we haven't heard reports of a power reduction related to that, which is what you would expect, because you would expect this to reduce the airflow coming into the cylinder, and cause a reduction in power. And I know that's an issue with certain, like automotive engines have that problem. Like ones that, are like turbocharged direct injected engines can do that kind of thing. We see
Can
that
that buildup?
What's that?
Sorry, Dave. Can that buildup be removed?
That's one of the topics of discussion. So I have another picture here. Well, there was a picture. See, this picture here shows some of it broke off. But I have another one that was a couple images here. This one here. Now, this was actually from a Continental engine. What is it? An 0300 that they used in a 182, I believe, or 172.
Yeah, 172. The early
Yeah.
172 said the 0300. Yep.
Yeah, this guy was interesting. So he was it part of a club, right?
Yeah.
So it was part of a club, and they were flying this airplane, and the engine had a lot of rust in the cylinders. So we're not sure how much of this is due to this massive buildup on the back of this intake valve, or if there was an issue with the cam. But this one here, they were reporting lower performance from the airplane. Like some of the members of the club said that they felt like it just didn't perform like it used to. Like it didn't take off as quick, didn't climb as fast. I don't remember what prop it was equipped with. If it had, I don't know if they had constant speed props on those or if they were fixed pitch. If this was a fixed pitch prop, one of the ways you assess horsepower is doing static power, static full power runs, and seeing what your RPM is. And there's a prescribed RPM range that's usually in the POH. And if it's below that RPM range, then it's not making horsepower. In the case of this valve here, it's hard to imagine that it's not causing some reduction in power. And this is by far the worst one we've ever seen. In the automotive world, when they encounter this kind of thing, they use walnut shells to blast the stuff off the back of the valve.
That's what I was wondering. Yep.
Yeah, I suppose you could do it in an airplane engine, though I've not heard anybody doing it. And heard about like how they kept it from getting in the cylinder, if there was any issue
Right.
with it getting in the cylinder. You'd obviously on an aircraft engine, like a Continental where they have like a runner type intake, you'd want to take the intake pipe off and close off the adjacent intake pipe,
Right.
Yeah, I mean that if I had it in my shop, I'd probably try doing something to it to see. I mean, maybe you can just break it off with a wood stick too. I don't.
That's what I was wondering, how brittle it is, how hard it would be to.
Yeah, I don't know. And that's like this picture here. You can see some of it broke off on its own.
Right.
You know, you can see there's a real thick buildup right there, but right here, there's not much of anything.
Would it then just go out the exhaust valve, you think, or?
I'm guessing it went through the cylinder. It probably go and I don't know if it burns up in the combustion event or if it bounces around and gets ejected out like FOD would.
Yeah.
Because we've seen that where you get like a screw or a piece of a
Yep.
turbo or something migrates into a cylinder and bounces around in there, and they'll leave like ding marks all over the cylinder.
Yeah.
Um, what else do we have here to look at? So this is an issue we've seen a bunch lately. So this is the cylinder wall, and you can see how it's got like this, what looks like Venetian blinds running across the cylinder wall. See their parallel lines.
Right.
That is, we referred to it as ring chatter. But that's something that Superior calls,
Washboarding.
yeah, washboarding. And this has actually been an issue with some Superior cylinders. The oldest one that we've seen was about 10 years old.
Mhm.
And the newest one we saw was what, maybe 2 years out? 2 years ago? Was 2 years ago. And I talked to Bill Ross about this issue, and he said that he called it a hesitation in the hone pattern. And I asked him about like what does he mean by that, and what he was saying is that at the end of the hone pattern, like so when they're running, the hone is basically like a stone they're running up and down the cylinder barrel. When it gets to the top, it's slowing down too much before it starts going the other way, and it's causing the scratches from the home pattern, instead of being perpendicular to the stroke of the piston, or instead of being on an angle, rather they're becoming perpendicular to the stroke of the piston, and that's causing the rings to have issues. And we've actually seen one client had a what was that, an 0360 in a long easy.
Mm.
That documented it very well for us. His cylinders had, I think, 50 hours or so on them when he started seeing this pattern and seeing lots. Usually when we see this, it's accompanied by lots of scoring. Sometimes we'll see like a complete half like of the cylinder barrel has no home pattern at all, and all it has is just complete scraping up and down the cylinder barrel. And that's because when the rings flutter and chatter like that, little bits of the chrome breaks off of the ring and embeds itself in the piston skirt, and then that those little chips of chrome are really hard, and they act like a file or a rasp, and they just scrape away at the cylinder wall. Um, it typically results in, of course, you get elevated wear metals in oil analysis, though there's not as much of that showing up because people aren't typically doing oil analysis in the first 50 hours after an overhaul, because you're gonna see high wear metals under normal conditions. But we'll see these types of patterns in the cylinder wall. Do you remember what the guy was that came to our shop? Do you remember his name?
I don't remember his name.
No, I don't remember. We had one come to our shop, which was the highest time.
His name might have been Michael.
I don't know if I can find it, and I don't hate calling him out here.
Mhm.
Um, let me see. Hang on. Get through here. Point to him if you see him. Did you see him? Maybe down here. Do you remember the guy's name?
Try that.
This one?
Maybe. It was a new one.
I don't know if it was this one or or a different one. Nah, it doesn't look like that one. May have been this one. Yeah, I think it was this one. So I think this is the one. So you see right here, this guy had about 1,000 hours on these cylinders in 2 years. So it was a very high use airplane. That was getting flown a lot, but had superior cylinders on it that had that washboarding in them. And this is what it resulted in, was that the cylinder barrel has no visible home pattern on it at all. Looking around, so like this is a view of a piston head, and up here in the corner, you can see just a little bit of the washboarding, and you can see a little bit over here, but the rest of it's all vertical scoring. And I have some other pictures of it. So I mean, we can run through his images. That's the exhaust valve. That's normal. But you see, that's a pretty faint heat signature. I think they were running Lena Peak with it. So here is more of that same cylinder wall. And you can see there's lots of scoring, lots of vertical wear on it. Interestingly enough, like a lot of the times when we hear about washboarding, the people talk about having high oil consumption. So like the guy with the Long Easy, he was saying he was having like a oil consumption of like a quart in 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
After 50 hours of running hard trying to break the engine in, and he was still having high oil consumption. And what ended up happening is he ended up sending those cylinders back to Superior under warranty, and they replaced them. And I haven't heard much from him since. I don't know if he's still breaking it in or.
I mean, I've actually sent a lot of people.
Yeah, we send a lot of people with this condition to Superior.
Yeah.
And you can see again here, you can see a little bit of the washboarding there. But no home pattern visible anywhere else. The other
Dave,
thing, what's that?
Are you suggesting this is a Superior related, issue commonly,
Yeah,
or
it's a
not
Superior
necessarily?
manufacturing defect.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
There's more. You can see there's another picture showing the washboarding.
Yeah, Bill Ross said they warranty them 37
It was,
months, and
I forget how many hours.
it was 37 months and something TBO.
Into TBO, maybe?
Into TBO,
Yeah,
yeah.
it might have been 37 months or TBO, whichever comes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
37.
Dave, I have a question.
Yeah.
Based on your conclusion that this is a manufacturing defect, would you suggest to folks that they should borescope their cylinders pretty early on so that they could get the benefit of the warranty?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, but our normal recommendation for cylinder inspections is 100 hours for normally aspirated and 50 for turbos.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean it wouldn't hurt to do it more frequent than that. A lot of people, there are quite a few people that will do them every oil change if they're doing their own work. Or if they do their, like if they do their own oil change and they can do a cylinder inspection, they'll do it at the same time. But yeah, it's definitely a good idea, like anything, to try to stay on top of it.
Are you having good luck with warranty claims? Will they be honored? Are you getting any pushback?
No, it seems like most of the time, from what we've heard from clients, if they see this issue, if they document it and we see it, we tell them to reach out to Superior, they'll replace them as long as they're within warranty.
Okay.
We have had, had a lot of people come back and say that they've replaced them, that
Yeah, that they'll give,
Superior replaced them.
yeah, they'll give them free cylinders.
Nice.
And you're not seeing this so much with Lycoming cylinders, for example?
Doesn't matter. Like we've seen them with Lycoming and Continental.
Yeah.
It's Lycoming and Continental, but only Superior. I haven't seen it happen in a Continental cylinder yet. There's always more pictures coming down the road and always new things to find.
I guess what I meant was a Lycoming factory supplied cylinder, not a
Or,
Lycoming.
yeah, like a Lycoming or a Continental factory supplied cylinder. I have not seen it from either one of those. It's only
Okay.
been Superior. But we've seen, you know, Superior makes cylinders for Lycoming
Sure,
and
of course.
Continental. And we've seen them in
Yep.
both. So,
Right.
oh, what did you want to look at?
Good.
You all right?
Yeah.
All right. Trying to think what else other interesting stuff we've seen.
I mean, you guys have given us a lot here, so I mean, we've taken a lot of your time. If we want to start,
yeah, I don't know how long you want to go, or
I think this is good. I mean, I've got a couple of questions. If anybody else in the group does, so we can start wrapping here.
all
I have a
right. How do I
question.
get this back to full view?
You can't push that button.
Which one?
No, the one, the grid.
The grid view. Nope, that didn't do it.
Push it again.
Maybe I expand the window. I don't know how to stop sharing my screen.
Oh, I'll just take it back if I can.
All
How
right,
about
yeah, why
that?
don't you do that? Yeah, take it back.
Let me figure out how to do that.
Uh-oh, I hope I didn't lose him.
I think I just took it back.
Yeah,
Or
there you
I
go.
tried to take it
Yeah.
back.
Okay.
So we got a question.
Well,
I have a
lost my
question
screen
for you.
altogether now.
I have a question. From a basic point of view, what is your favorite Borescope? What, for a new guy who's just, you know, an airplane owner, not a mechanic, what's a good Borescope?
The VA 400 is what we use in house. We have every version of it, all the way from the original to the latest version, and we break them and upgrade them. And the latest version of it's the VA 400i, which came out at Oshkosh, and that was our first experience using it. The advantage to that one over I think it's the VA 400 V5. The V5 and the 400i are the same physical scope, same camera, but the 400i has the capability to hook to, you know, an Android or an Apple phone or tablet, or even a PC, with whatever, you know, I don't know, software or whatever they have on board of the scope. It can do that. So all you need, and it comes with it. It comes with an adapter to go from the USB, what is it, USB-A to USB-C or to FireWire.
Lightning.
Yeah, or Lightning. I guess FireWire, Lightning,
And-
or the USB-C.
And who's the manufacturer? VA?
That's Vanilla is the manufacturer, but their primary distributor for it is Oasis Scientific.
Oasis Scientific.
If you're buying one of these scopes, I would buy it from them if at all possible, because they make updates to them periodically, and some of the other distributors will have older versions of the scope. You know, like if you bought it from Amazon or, you know, some other party.
Oh, good. Okay.
You'll have the best chance of getting the newest version from them. If you're not going to use their scope, then what I would look for is a scope with a rigid shank, you know, rigid shaft, and an articulating tip.
And is that the way the VA 400i is?
Yeah, that's the way the VA 400 is. You don't want to have a flexible shaft borescope for cylinder inspections. If you have one, it's not that it's impossible to do a cylinder inspection effectively, but it's very difficult. And we see a lot of, you know, bad images from people that use them. And the reason is that you're trying to precisely position the camera in very specific ways. And if the shaft of the scope bends, you're losing the movement that you're applying to it in the flexibility of the shaft instead of, moving the camera the way you want to.
Right. Oh, thanks. Well, thanks for that info. Appreciate that.
Yeah, Dan, I have one. I've had one for years. Glad to share further about it.
Okay, great.
So is there a question about the cam that's up here?
I just thought I'd throw it up as another, for Lycoming. If you had any comments about that.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk at pretty big length about cams and lifters. We've been looking at cams and lifters with, during our cylinder inspections for, pretty much the whole time we've been doing them on every annual inspection. So probably 10 years. And it's basically the engines that you can see the cam and lifter on are going to be the 540 series engines that have the short oil filler neck on the left side of the case half. Or like the Sandcast Continentals, so like your IO or like your 0470s that would have been used in like 182s will have an oil filler on the left side of the engine case. And then the only other one that I can think of off the top of my head is the 0320 H2AD that would have been used in some 172s. That engine also has a short oil filler neck, kind of similar to the 540. On the 540, it's very helpful to take the oil filler neck off. And when you're doing these pictures, I don't know if you have control of the screen, right?
Yes, that's my engine right there on the screen.
Okay, so the focus of what you're trying to see is the face of the lifter and the
Which you can't see here. Yeah, you can't see that
and
here.
the apex of the cam lobe, right? So
Yep.
The right image you can see the apex of the cam lobe, and in neither image you can see the face of the lifter.
Yep.
So for the most part, what you're trying to do, or like what you would do, so the picture on I don't think this is the same cam lobe. So the picture on the right looks like cylinder, what is that? Cylinder 6, I
Right.
think is what it is, the most aft.
In the back. Yep.
Yeah, on the back on the left side, right? That's cylinder 6.
Yep. Yep.
That's the exhaust valve. So what I would do from that picture, I'd take the picture you had right there first, and then I'd pull the scope out and rotate the engine 1 revolution. And when you do that, that would point the cam lobe 180 degrees out from where it is. And then I'd try to work the scope in a little further and bend it around so that
Yep.
it's looking
Yep.
at as much of the lifter face as you can see.
Right.
The picture on the left that shows the cam lobe apex pointing on the top edge of the lifter face. If you could get the scope kind of more underneath the cam lobe and look back at the lifter,
Right. Right.
that would be what you would try to do. And those 2 areas are where you're going to see the issues. And what you start to see when there's issues, you'll see like pitting on the lifter face, and you'll see like scuff marks on the lead up and lead out of the apex, and sometimes they'll even go across the apex, and they look kind of like you took a coarse sandpaper and just scratched it over the apex of the cam lobe. That's the early sign that there's something going on. Now, unfortunately, on engines like yours, you can't pull the lifters out and change them.
No.
On the Continentals, when we see that, we pull the lifter out and put a new lifter in right away. And if it's just at the stage where it has those scratches in it, we find for the most part that you can continue to run it without any issue. They'll just kind of polish out and it'll run on.
Right.
Right. If they're gone farther than that, what eventually starts happening is those scratches will break through the hardened layer on the cam, and then it wears the apex down, and you'll end up with like a ramp on the apex. Because if you notice, it's hard to see in the image on the left. You can kind of see it a little bit in the image on the right.
Yep.
the lifters don't ride centered on the cam lobe. They're offset. And they do
Right.
that on purpose to spin the lifter as the cam lobe is running around in circles, you know.
Right.
So what happens when you have a worn cam is the cam doesn't wear evenly. It'll develop a ramp across the apex. That ramp then starts eating at the corner of the lifter. And then if you go and change it at that point, the new lifter will develop like a rounded edge, and then it'll start chipping around the edge of the lifter. And if you continue to run it, eventually it'll start digging at the cam and it'll break chips off the far side of the cam lobe.
Right.
If it's an exhaust cam lobe, or I mean, if it's an intake, it may not, but you know what I mean? At
Yep.
that point, you're really looking at an overhaul.
Yep. Yep.
I saw somebody type a question up. Did you get that?
Yeah, Eric Gleason asked if a valve can't be lapped, what's the next step? Overhaul the cylinder, question mark.
I mean, it's pulling the cylinder off. You don't have to overhaul it. There's basically, you know, you can do an IRAN. If the cylinder's in good enough condition, they can just hone the cylinder barrel, put new rings in, put a new exhaust valve. I don't know if they change the seat out when they do that, but I do know they will change the guide out when they do that. Or you can do an overhaul to it, or you can replace it with new, or basically the three options. Most of the time, most of the clients in our shop will opt for the IRAN, because I think the last time I did one was about like $1,200 for the IRAN, where a new cylinder I think is like 22 or $2,400 on average. You know, so it's a little less money to get your cylinder IRAN.
All right. I have one other question before we go. You mentioned earlier about how the geometry between the rocker on the Lycomings, that the geometry between the rocker arm and the valve with proper geometry, that's what, you know, helps create some rotation on the valve. Is there a way, can you pull the engine through and see if that geometry is actually you know, promoting the valve rotation? Can that be observed?
Yeah, I haven't been able to, but I haven't really had a chance recently to do it. Like I haven't been able to visualize the rotation of the valve like I can on a Continental.
Right.
Like I'm sure everybody's seen the video on my YouTube where you're basically like staking the valve,
Right.
and the rotator will move if it's working.
Exactly.
You know, but on the Lycoming, it's a lot harder, because it really, like if you look at that cap, it's just a cap that just sits over the end of the valve stem, and it can spin freely on the valve stem. It's really kind of strange.
You can't whack it with a mallet to see if it, I mean,
I don't know, maybe, but you know, you got to be careful too doing that stuff.
right.
You can
Right.
bend rocker arms
You
and
damage stuff. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I haven't tried staking a Lycoming valve to see. Oh, what was that?
Oh, that was, I don't know, off center bullseye. This is
Oh
just slides
yeah,
I put
hey,
together.
yeah. I mean yeah, that one on the right there is a little wonky looking.
Yeah,
That head.
that's, you see, we have about a third of our type that are turbocharged, and that's actually off a friend of mine's turbocharged engine. And we've been watching that cylinder for a while, for a couple hundred hours now, that the valve.
Oh, wow, that's yeah, that's interesting. It looks like it's a little bit warped. You know what I mean? Because you see how
Uh-huh.
the outer ring narrows
Yep.
on like the what is it, like the 8 o'clock position and the 2 o'clock position.
Yep. And it's changed a bit. It hasn't always been like, I think I sent one of these to you like a year ago, and you were like, oh, just let's run it further and look for it again. And this was more recently. So
Yeah, yeah, I would just keep looking at it until it
yep. Until it
shows
tells you
you
something.
something. You know, that's interesting because like some turbos, the turbos like we recommend 50 hour inspection intervals. Normally, if we're doing a shortened inspection interval, we'll recommend a 25, but with turbos, sometimes we're telling people like, as little as like 10 or 15 hours.
Right.
And it all depends on how suspicious we are of the valve or how uncertain we are of it.
Right. All right. Well, Dave and Jess, thanks. Anybody else have any questions before we sign off here? We've been longer than expected, but I guess
Hey,
that's not a big,
hey,
total surprise.
Dave, I'd like to hear you give just a brief plug. You mentioned your YouTube presence. If people are interested in this, where can they find your YouTube channel, and what is there for them to look at that would give them some additional information?
For the engine stuff, I have the cylinder inspection. I have the same video that is shown on, that Savvy used for showing how to do the cylinder inspection is on there. But I also have a PowerPoint slide that I did years ago for the American Bonanza Society that shows like what normal valves look like, what valves with irregular heat signatures look like. They have, there's a chart in there that shows Mark's valve, the first one that we lapped, where it was the lead up to it being an uneven heat signature, and then the time after we lapped it. I think it goes to like 100 or 130 hours. I'm not sure if that one's updated to the point where it shows the rotator replacement. But it shows some of those kind of things. I have some videos that show like me testing rotators and different things like that.
No,
Um,
we'll put a plug for we'll put a mention of your YouTube
yeah, if you
channel
search,
on the type
yeah,
club site.
if you search for like Pasquale Aviation, or like cylinder inspection report or something like that, or cylinder Borescope cylinder inspection, it'll be one of the top hits on YouTube.
Okay, cool.
What's that? Yeah, and if anybody is interested too, while we're plugging stuff, Jess has been working up trying to do some classes at our shop too
Oh,
for cylinder inspection. We've had a bunch of people since Oshkosh ask us about it. Um, so if they shoot us an email, we can try to get a group together and do, some hands-on stuff in-house.
can that be done remotely also, or is it because a lot of our people are all over the country, or is that
Yeah,
just
I know. That's the tough part. I haven't figured out how to do it that way.
If we can figure out something, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for now, we did the cylinder inspection workshop out at Oshkosh, and we plan to try to do that again next year. Um, but we're trying to find ways to do that, for people who didn't make it to Oshkosh or can't make it to Oshkosh.
right? Okay, well we'll keep up with that, and we'll keep our group informed. And I'm going to turn this recording off now.